From The Times and The Sunday Times, this is The Story. I'm Rosie Wright. You might not have immediately recognised his name, but you will know his films.
I'm sorry, Harry. I know it's New Year's Eve. I know you're feeling lonely, but you just can't show up here, tell me you love me, and expect that to make everything all right. It doesn't work this way.
Well, how does it work?
I don't know, but not this way.
It's very, very special because if you can see, the numbers all go to 11.
You want answers!
I want the truth! You can't handle the truth!
When Harry Met Sally, A Few Good Men, this is Spinal Tap. Just some of the masterpieces from the Hollywood titan, Rob Reiner, who was found dead last Sunday alongside his wife. His son has been charged with their murder. He appeared in court on Wednesday in a suicide prevention vest. One woman who knew Rob Reiner was our writer, Hadley Freeman.
It's just the incongruence of someone who made the sweetest of films and who himself embodied such goodness to be killed in this most inexplicably evil way.
This case has shocked Hollywood to its core. But how did this man become not just a movie icon, but a political activist? And why is President Trump wading in? The story today: Rob Reiner, Donald Trump, and Hollywood politics.
I was in bed. I woke up and picked up the phone, see what time it was, and saw all these messages from friends.
In the early hours of Monday morning, Hadley was at home when the news started filtering through.
I just couldn't believe it because Rob Reiner and murder are just words that don't make any sense together, and they still don't. Rob and his wife, Michele, and I believe their youngest child, their daughter, Romy, went to Conan O'Brien's Christmas party in Los Angeles on Saturday night, and allegedly, Rob and Michele asked Conan if they could bring their son Nick because they didn't want to leave him on his own. There was reportedly some altercation at the party between Nick and other guests and between Rob and Nick. They all went home. Nick was at that point living in his parents' guest house where he'd reportedly been living for several years. He's 32. And next thing that happened, the Sunday, a massage therapist came to the house in the afternoon. Rob had booked a massage, couldn't get in, called the daughter, Romy. She came to the house, opened the door, and here we are.
Lots of the details, of course, we don't know yet, and there's obviously a police investigation ongoing. It's fair to say that it's caused absolute grief in Hollywood.
To me, I'm really overwhelmed, and it's not like I was a close personal friend at all. It's really just beyond. You know, if Rob Reiner had died in a car crash or had a heart attack or something, there would still be masses of grief, absolutely, as he was a really special man and incredibly talented. But it's, you know, the fact that he was A, murdered, and B, allegedly by his son, it just makes absolutely no sense at all.
How integral is he to Hollywood?
I think of him as almost like the George Bailey figure of Hollywood. George Bailey is Jimmy Stewart's character in It's a Wonderful Life. And he's a character who embodies just generosity and goodness and is connected to every single person. That was Rob Reiner. You know, Rob Reiner grew up Hollywood royalty. You know, his father was a very successful comedian, Carl Reiner. But Rob went off and made his own career, which in itself connected him to even more people. His independent production company, Castle Rock, made so many of the best films of the late 20th century, many of which Rob directed, of course, you know, whether it was Misery When Harry Met Sally, Shawshank Redemption. He produced Seinfeld. He was our VHS dad, the guy who raised us in the 80s and 90s as we watched all of his movies. He encouraged young artists to make their projects. You talk to any successful comedian now in their 40s, 50s in Hollywood, at some point they will have come across Rob Reiner. And for me, like, a genuine nobody, some hack in Britain, I contacted him at the beginning of this year to him, writing a book about someone he knew. Would he possibly talk to me? He immediately set it up by Zoom, talked to me for over an hour, was available for me to email him any fact-checking questions anytime, would get back to me within 5 minutes. Like, nobody does that. And if he was doing that with me, with my teeny little book, like, imagine that large scale in Hollywood. That is who Rob Reiner was.
Let's go to that first meeting, actually. It's kind of clear why you would be interested in getting to know him. What was that about? How did you persuade him to sit down with you?
I was in Los Angeles for some reason, interviewing other people who had projects out. And we met at this restaurant near his home in Brentwood. And we literally just talked about his movies. And it's not like he was sitting there kind of stroking his ego. He loved talking about the talents of the people he worked with, whether it was Nora Ephron or Carrie Elwes, Billy Crystal, et cetera, et cetera. He just loved his life, loved that he was able to make these things, and loved talking about it with people who loved them too. And at the end, I said to him, please, I'm sorry, I never do this, but can I just hug you? And he was like, of course, and took me into a big hug. And I said, I'm really sorry. I know this is the least professional thing in the world, but do you mind if I get a photo with you? And he was like, of course. And we took like all these photos of the two of us. He was just the sweetest, fun-loving, smart, interested in you kind of guy.
You mentioned his family. What sense did you get when you were talking to Rob about how important family was to him?
For Rob Reiner, family was everything. It was so important to him that his email address had the word dad in it. And he had this little baseball cap, I remember, that had dad on the front. Like, all he wanted was to be as good a dad to his kids as his father was to him. Like his father, he had 3 kids. Like his father, he was raising them in Los Angeles. Who wouldn't want Rob Reiner as a dad? To me, to all of us, I think we just looked at him as the dream father. And he talked about his kids a lot. I did ask him about his kids sometimes, especially after he made his 2015 movie about his difficult relationship with Nick, called Being Charlie.
It was never about the drugs. All I ever wanted was a way to kill the noise.
Getting sober is a selfish thing. You gotta help yourself first.
So Being Charlie was a script that Nick wrote while he was in rehab. Nick had been in and out of rehab since he was 15 years old. And it's a movie about a drug addict son struggling with having a famous father. And Rob directed it. He cast his, very dear friend Carrie Elwes, who Princess Bride fans will know from, as played Wesley in The Princess Bride, to play him. And it's a very, very painful movie to watch. It's very self-flagellating about Rob. Well, I would say it's more castigating if from the point of view of Nick. It's very much blaming the father for not listening to the son enough and being too tough and listening too much to doctors. I think the movie was entirely based on their actual relationship. Both of them talked about this at the time.
It's by far the most personal thing that I've ever done. The fact that we were dealing with, things that Nick had gone through, it forced me to have to see more clearly and understand more deeply what Nick had gone through.
I think the bonding came not from the story itself, but from the fact that we were working on a movie together, and I could see him in I would think, in the form that he could express himself the best.
And Rob said when I talked to him, he wished he'd listened to his son more during the treatment and paid less attention to doctors who were telling them that their son was a liar and their son is this, their son is that. And you can just see the pain in the family.
How does that make you feel? It's very, very difficult to hear that, particularly now.
Yeah, it's just incredibly sad. I mean, I'm not making any assumptions about what was going on in those family dynamics, but all I know of Rob Reiner was his main priority in life was his children and having a safe, happy, contented family.
There's a difficulty, Hadley, when someone's died, that you always talk about them in the most sort of the kindest way, potentially with rose-tinted glasses. But your experience, you said actually his character, not only is he sort of this VHS dad, but that he worked really collaboratively, very generously, and also because family was important to him, he worked with them as well. So they sort of interweaved them into his professional career.
Yes, I know that everyone is saying, is so cliched, he was such a great guy, et cetera, et cetera. But the truth is Rob Reiner really was that guy. For proof, you need to look at, what other actors who have very different political beliefs from him are saying too. James Woods, a very far right, strong Republican actor, has spoken up saying how much he loved Rob Reiner. They worked together on the film Ghost of Mississippi. And he said he and Rob would always, hug each other at parties, pat each other on the back. And when James Woods' Republican friends were like, what are you doing talking to that big liberal? He'd say, this is Rob Reiner. We understand each other. And yes, and his movies are rooted in family. He famously cast his mother in When Harry Met Sally. He made a movie about his son. He was a real man who understood the importance of family and being grounded. And that's what he was.
What was the role his mother played?
So he cast his mother, Estelle, to be the woman in Katz's Deli who says, I'll have what she's having.
Yeah.
The most famous line in the movie, and he gave it to his mom.
Yes! 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 Oh! 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 Oh, God. Oh.
I'll have what she's having.
That is so iconic, isn't it? It's probably the most famous scene, maybe in all of movie history, actually. When you asked him about it, and because he actually is the one who should take credit for it, he wouldn't take it, would he?
No. So Rob Reiner actually wrote that orgasm scene. Like, people don't seem to know this, although Nora Ephron was always very open about it. Nora wrote the rest of the movie. And then Rob Reiner called her up one day and said, Andy Scheinman and Andy Scheinman was his production partner, have written this scene about this idea that women fake orgasms sometimes. And he read it to her down the phone and she said she loved it. And so they put it in the script. And then during rehearsals, Meg Ryan suggested that she actually fake an orgasm at the table. And Nora and Rob were like, yes, that's great. And then Billy Crystal, who plays Harry, came up with the line, someone should say, oh, I'll have what she's having. And so then Rob cast his mom to say that line. So it's, Nora Ephron compared it to a pizza and that everybody puts on different ingredients. And it just came out perfectly.
It's sort of impossible to talk about him and not mention that film. He met his wife on set. Tell us what happened.
When they were making the movie, Rob was single. He'd gotten divorced from Penny Marshall, the director, about 6 years earlier. And he was inspired to make the movie because he was having such a miserable time dating. And so he pitched the film to Nora Ephron. She thought it was a funny idea. And originally the film was going to end with Harry and Sally kind of falling out with each other. And then the last scene was them meeting on the street a few years later and being like, oh, hi, and then going their separate ways again. And then halfway through the shoot, Rob Reiner's friend, Barry Sonnenfeld, the director, said to him, I've got this great girl, Michele Singer, I'd love to introduce you to. Who Michele was a photographer. And they met. And then, as Rob said to me, then I understood how people got together. And so that's when they decided to end the movie with Harry and Sally getting married.
So it changed the end of the film?
Yeah, it absolutely changed the end of the film. His dating life inspired the film, and his marriage changed the end of the film.
He clearly, and you're talking about him with such affection and such warmth, left a bit of a mark on you.
Oh, I mean, it's so much. Like I say, he's one of, I can count on one hand the number of people I've interviewed who I've asked for a photo with. Can count on one finger the number of people I've interviewed who I asked for a hug from. And that one is Rob Reiner. It sounds banal. To say he was a really good guy is an understatement. He was just goodness. You just look at him and he was just goodness. He was a guy who only wanted to make people happy, to do good things, leave behind good things, and to lead a good life. Like, what more can any of us ask for of someone? I don't think I'll ever be able to get my head around what's happened. I really don't. And I can't even imagine what it's like for those for whom he was a part of their daily life. I really can't.
Do you want to start by just telling me who you are, your name and your title?
My name is Kevin Maher, and I am the chief film critic at The Times.
You've written about Rob Reiner, his influence on movie making. If it's possible, how do you describe what kind of director he was? Because he could do so many different genres.
Yes, Rosie, you have literally answered the question there. That is exactly the type of director he was. He could do every genre. It's really, really unusual to have a filmmaker like him. You know, he goes back to sort of old Hollywood type of director, a studio director who is charged with making different type of genres. Pretentious French film critics have a great word for what he was, which is, and they call it a métier en scène, as opposed to an auteur. So you see filmmakers as two types. There's an auteur-director like Scorsese who directs films that have his signature on every frame, and there is a métier en scène, which is what Rob Reiner was, which is a director who could try his hand at anything.
The way I look at any film that I do is there's a spine that goes through a film, and you decide ahead of time what is the story you want to take. In other words, each scene you'll learn a little bit more about who this guy is. So by the end of the journey, you say, okay, I got a full picture of who he is.
However, the proviso here is that he was exceptional when he tried his hand at anything. You know, he made a horror thriller with Misery, a kids film with Princess Bride, A Few Good Men, a grown-up courtroom drama, When Harry Met Sally, a rom-com, Spinal Tap, a mockumentary. He didn't just dip his hand into these genres. This sounds such a horrible cliche, but he genuinely redefined them. And in some cases, as in the mockumentary, established the genre parameters. He's a unicorn filmmaker, a very unusual thing, which is he's both a métier en scène and an auteur. He's someone who does all genres and yet masters them.
Yeah, we talked about this with Hadley. It is tricky not to sound cliched because he was exceptional, and not just, and obviously he was born into sort of a Hollywood family, but not just as a director, but also as an actor as well. He could turn his hand to sort of different dimensions of the film industry.
Yeah, I'd argue that part of the success of This Is Spinal Tap is his deadpan belief that he really is on camera Marty DeBerge, the Scorsese-esque hard-hitting documentary maker, and that's a testament to his performing skills.
Later on in his career, Kevin, he's quite politically minded, and that comes out in the films he makes as well.
Yeah, off-screen, super active politically, everything from, gay marriage to smoking bans, heavy Democrat supporter. The most interesting thing I find about him is that, recently he was backing and really trying hard to develop a series I think it was called The Spy and His Asset, about Trump and Putin and the parallels on their lives and how they got connected. And he was one of the more public figures behind the investigation of Russia and the presidential elections. Yeah, he's a very, very active politically and unafraid to put his money where his mouth was.
There's a nice bit in the Times obit where apparently he considered going for governor of California. That would have been up against Arnold Schwarzenegger, but decided to sort of canvass his family and realised, if I can't get my family on side, I probably can't get the Californian public as well, which I think was very wise.
I think he was asked to run against Trump in the first election, and he said no. He probably thought he could influence more people by his campaigns and by making movies about Trump and Putin.
Kevin, you've been telling us about sort of how multifaceted Rob was, how diverse his skill set was, not just as a director, but clearly an activist as well. That has drawn the ire of one particular political figure. Tell us what's been going on.
Poor old, thin-skinned, ignoramus Donald Trump reacted really badly to Rob Reiner's death, dissed him on social media, and then when he was queried about it, he said to White House reporters that Rob Reiner was very bad for our country.
I wasn't a fan of his at all. He was a deranged person as far as Trump is concerned. I think he hurt himself in career-wise. So I was not a fan of Rob Reiner at all in any way, shape, or form. I thought he was very bad for our country.
he had said on social media that Trump derangement syndrome was somehow connected to his death, which is deeply stupid. Anyway, so yes, Trump is very angry because Reiner is basically a Democrat. And it just fits into Trump's pattern of feeling victimized and whining about trying to make Hollywood great again by hiring a bunch of suboptimal has-beens to wave his flag around Tinseltown.
Yeah, to quote exactly what Donald Trump said, it's quite a lengthy post, and it starts by saying sort of a very sad thing happened last night in Hollywood. And it goes on to say, the talented movies director and comedy star passed away, I'm quoting here, reportedly due to the anger he caused others through his massive, unyielding and incurable affliction with a mind-crippling disease known as Trump derangement syndrome. That is in the iconic capital letters that the president so often uses. Why do you think his death, which is in tragic circumstances, engineered a response like this?
Oh, because it just feeds into a narrative. Trump is he's an all visual president. He's not a reader. There's nothing happening in his head. It's all about images, and Hollywood is the great image maker. And he was in The Apprentice, the TV show. He sees himself as some sort of Reagan-esque movie star president, and it really hurts that most of Hollywood doesn't like him, and that Rob Reiner is the epitome of most of Hollywood. Trump thinks that Hollywood needs to be made great again. So he has his hilarious Hollywood ambassadors, John Boyce, Mel Gibson, and Sylvester Stallone, because he likes to get people who've got their finger on the pulse, constantly suing people, suing CBS, suing ABC, anytime anybody says something that slightly annoys him.
And he does want to seem to try at the same time to protect Hollywood. He's been putting tariffs on foreign movies. That's had quite a big impact.
Trump's tariff on foreign movies is a classic. It's the epitome of how confused he is, that he's calling films foreign films, anything that's made outside the US foreign films. And he's completely clueless that more than half of Hollywood movies, of the main franchise movies, are made in the UK. He has no concept of how international filmmaking really is these days.
Kevin, we started by talking not about politics, which I think it's sad, actually. This is where this story has ended up. But actually, this one man who shaped cinema so fantastically, I would love to know, how do you think he will be remembered, and also how he should be?
Yeah, I think Rob Reiner should be remembered for his heart. What I mean by that is what so many filmmakers miss is the core emotional connection in his films, in the characters in his films. And filmmaking today is so much about spectacle. Filmmaking today is so much about technique, and filmmakers are I think maybe post-Tarantino, filmmakers are praised for the surface and what they can do. Rob Reiner was unself-conscious enough to care about having sympathetic, empathetic characters on screen, people that demonstrated emotional connections with each others and for whom you wanted to care. Even a few good men, you care about all. You even care. The genius of that film is you care about Jack Nicholson's Colonel Jessup, which is crazy. He should be the villain. Yet there's something pathetic about him on the stand when he finally breaks and says, "You can't handle the truth." And that's the mark of a genius film director. A great script and a great cast, but a genius film director.
That was Kevin Maher, chief film critic at The Times, and Hadley Freeman, columnist and feature writer at The Sunday Times. Today's producers were Harry Stott and Olivia Case. The executive producer was Tim Walklate. Sound design was by David Crackles, and theme composition was by Mal Lassetto. And I'm Rosie Wright. Do leave us a review. It helps others to find us. And if you'd like to get in touch, it's thestory@thetimes.com. See you again soon.